Yeah, that works. Or I can always come back for round 2.
Yeah, you need another excuse to get out of the house.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. We are joined by Kinetic OG, Mr. Ben Heller, for his repeat podcast performance. I think we recorded the first one. Man, it had to be 3 or 4 years ago after Tommy John now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very appreciative of you taking some time to come back this year.
Yeah, always fun to sit down and talk shop and talk about how this year went for me.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with Ben, I'll include the links to his last podcast that he did with us, but he's a major league relievers, pitched for the Yankees, the Diamondbacks, the Twins, the Rays, and now the Braves, and had a very, successful career for a relatively late drafted pitcher, and really been able to stick in the game, 8?
This was year 10.
Year 10? Holy
10,
cow.
yeah.
Decade of professional baseball, which is just unbelievable.
It is hard to believe. Yeah. I mean, if I would have told my younger self that baseball would be my only job for 10 years out of college, I don't think I'd believe it.
Yeah, no, I mean, people just don't understand how difficult it is, and that's some of the stuff that I want to get into a little bit. So I'd really love to kind of recap. You talk about like your baseball story or your baseball journey all the time, and I know these last couple of years have been, some ups, some really huge highs this season, and some really kind of low lows over the past couple of years. Could you just give the folks like a little overview of what the last couple of years of professional baseball have been like for you?
Yeah. So 2017 was actually my last full healthy season that I played from start to finish before this year. So 2018 I had Tommy John surgery and so we rehabbed that, and I made it back to the big leagues from that in 2019, but still kind of ran into some injuries, and injuries started to bounce around my body. Went from the elbow to the shoulder to the back to the elbow to the forearm. I just could never quite seem to stay fully healthy, and so in 2021 I signed with the Diamondbacks, went there for spring training, and I was rehabbing my back when I went in and rushed myself trying to get ready for the season, trying to make the big league team out of spring training, and I ended up blowing out my elbow, stress fracture in the elbow, which cost me the entire 2021 season. And that was kind of, for me, a point where I thought maybe, this actually might be the end. But I ended up sticking with the rehab, committing to basically just getting healthy and seeing what would happen. I ended up getting healthy about halfway through 2022 and signed a minor league deal with the Twins. That did not go well at all, results-wise. I felt pretty good. My stuff was back to, my stuff was at a level that I felt like I could pitch in the big leagues, but my command was all over the place. I just didn't have any feel. I hadn't pitched competitively in a couple of years, and I ended up getting released by the Twins at the end of 2022, before the season even ended, actually. So basically 2 years of rehab to sign with the Twins, and I was with them for about a month. And that was I guess probably my lowest point of my baseball career, and I was very seriously considering hanging them up at that point. And I think I still would have been fine, if I would have done that. And I was ready to turn the page, and I had gotten healthy, which was my commitment to myself. I didn't want to let the injuries be what ended my career. And I did that, but eventually, that off season, which was, I guess, roughly about a year ago this time now, going into 2023, I was fortunate enough for the Rays to show some interest in me, and I ended up signing a minor league deal with them, and which led into this year, which we can get into. But yeah, I guess, just the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years even, have basically been filled with injuries. Not a lot of time on the field, a lot of questioning if I still wanted to do it, if it was still worth it. The return on investment of the time that I put into trying to get my body ready it seemed like it was dwindling away. But ultimately, I'm super thankful I did stick with it, because this year was super special for me, and made all the low points really worth it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's awesome, and kind of I want to circle back to a lot of that, some of that story and what you learned in terms of the mechanics and changes and things that you did that way. But let's at least talk about the highlights, and not the only reason that we're talking today, but got traded to the Braves during the middle of the season essentially, and then ended up getting called back up, and not only getting called back up, but really getting called back up and absolutely shelling. So what was it like to actually make it back and get on that mound and then really perform?
It was surreal, to be honest. It's hard to put into words, exactly how I felt. Pitching any game in the major leagues is just such an incredible feeling. It's such a rush of adrenaline and dopamine and satisfaction and pride, all these, really good things, like just to pitch in a big league game at all. But to be able to do it after going through this sort of adversity that I had made it even more enjoyable. And I felt like I actually really appreciated it more than maybe I did the first time around, when I was with the Yankees. Just having so much more perspective of how fleeting a big league career can be, and how fortunate I am, or anybody is, to pitch in a major league game. So in spring training this year with the Rays, my stuff, my velocity, movement, location, everything really started to trend up, and I could tell in spring training that I was actually the best pitcher that I've ever been personally. At 31 years old, I was the best pitcher that I've ever been in my life, which that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of, because that's everything that's within my control. All the work that I put in directly influenced how I was able to throw the ball. All the rest of circumstances and the business decisions, all that's kind of out of my control. But I could tell in spring training that I was going to be able to hopefully do some really cool things this year. And so I ended up starting the year in AAA for the Rays, pitched really well there. Velocity held pretty strong, and then got traded to the Braves, and shortly after that got called up. And I feel like I had the mentality of, I'm just going to go out there like I have nothing to lose, because I don't. I'm just going to go lay it all on the line. Every pitch is everything I've got. I'm going to have fun with it. Just going to see what happens. And I ended up doing really well, just kind of dominating guys, really.
Yeah. That was you were just on an unbelievable hot streak there. Those first few games up. I think my favorite text exchange was, you had one outing that you had 3 strikeouts and 1 walk, and I was like, I texted you. I was like, that's a classic Ben Heller inning. Yeah. And I think your response was, the other guy would have struck out too, but he leaned in on one or something like that.
Yeah. He didn't want any part of trying to hit me.
So. I just want to stop there for a second for any of the high school kids, which I think this whole podcast is going to be like required reading or listening for anyone that we work with that plays baseball. But, just think about what Ben just said, that he's been a professional baseball player for 10 years now, and feels like he's continued to develop to the spot that he is the best pitcher that he can, or that he's ever been right now. And talking to so many kids, I don't know that you have to fall in love with the process, and you have to fall in love with like being good, or like continuing to work on yourself and control what you can control. I have so many conversations that's like, the pitching coach had me do this, or I should have started over that guy, or this thing happened, like worrying about results and like things that are outside your control, versus like just do the work and focus on being the best that you can be, and not just being satisfied like, oh, I'm a varsity starter, so I'm good. Like, well, not if you want to play college baseball, not if you want to, do this for the long run. Like, you have to keep working. You can never just feel like, oh, I've arrived, like I've reached my goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it. You have to fall in love with the process, and I think that's true with anything in life. Anything that you want to be exceptional at, you have to fall in love with the process. But I think the temptation is to focus on the destination and think about, oh, why am I not there right now? Or try and, seek affirmation of like, oh, I'm on varsity. That means that I basically made it. Like, no, like zoom out, look at the bigger picture of where you were, where you're trying to go, and the process of what it's going to take to get there. And that process and the journey itself, I think, is what it's all about. So yeah, I think for me, I fell in love with the process of developing as a baseball player from the time I was in probably a sophomore in high school. And every day of my life since that time, I have tried to structure my life in order to make 1% improvements a day, or whatever 0.1%, just get a tiny bit better in some way every single day. And those improvements will start to compound over time, and before you know it, you're gonna look up and you'll be in the big leagues.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Just really, really good advice. And I think every high school kid should re-listen to this little 5-minute section like every day, because it's really good. Yeah. Okay, so another high of the season, I'm sure for you, would be pitching in Milwaukee, getting to pitch against the Brewers for I think the first time in your career. I guess you pitched against them in spring training one year, but never at home. So what was it like to kind of pitch against the hometown team that you grew up with?
Yeah, that was a really special series, and honestly, I'd say to this point, it's probably the highlight of my career, the high point of my baseball career. I grew up a huge Brewers fan, just like probably a lot of kids listening to this, and going to Miller Park 20 times a summer, always just dreaming of being out there on that field. I always envisioned myself pitching for the Brewers, but it's actually a little bit even more sweet getting to strike out guys on the Brewers. But it also kind of worked out that I pitched in some pretty big spots in those games. I pitched 2 out of the 3 games and got a hold in each of them. So it was a big spot. I had tons of family and friends in the stands, so much support. Like I really just was overflowing with thankfulness for the support, and just feeling of satisfaction of being able to kind of realize that childhood dream.
Yeah, no, it was cool. It was honestly the first time that we've ever finally been able to make it to a game between either the injuries or like when you made it back to the big leagues right after Tommy John is for the playoffs, and like Yankees playoff tickets were a little hard to come by for Lone and I to make it out there. So it was awesome, and I appreciate the Rays bullpen coach and manager for putting you in the 2 games that Lauren and I went to.
Yeah.
You rested the one that we couldn't make it, so it's fun to get you.
I told them to do that just for you guys.
we putting positive vibes out there. We're just gonna lobby now. Brewers, if you need some bullpen help, let's bring the hometown kid home for the year.
It seems like it'd be a good fit to me.
I think that's. Just such a cool season, but even with all that success and with how well you pitched, people that follow you closely know that you were up and down this year. And I think that's one of the things, like what you said, that you can't focus on the results, because it's like when you go out there and dominate and then you get sent back down, like what else can you do? It's just roster things sometimes. What is the experience like for a big leaguer, or really any professional baseball player, just having to like ride that wave and kind of be one of those guys that is on the 40-man but up and down off the major league roster?
Yeah, it can be tough for sure. I feel like I've gone through it for long enough now that I've kind of learned how to deal with it, but it's definitely, once you get to the big leagues, all you want to do is stay in the big leagues. Like everything about the big leagues is so much better than AAA that it's all you can focus on is how can I stay here, and AAA is just so much worse than this. I never want to go back there in my life. And there's definitely some guys who are fortunate enough, most of your star players or big league regular guys who do have that situation where they can go back. But the reality is most guys, most big league players or pro baseball guys are going to be, in the position where you don't stay in the big leagues forever. You don't, most of the time you're probably only going to get a cup of coffee and then be back in the minor leagues. But I think it goes back to just kind of zooming out and looking at the bigger picture of, your what are you trying to do, with baseball. And for me, I'm trying to be the best pitcher that I can be. I'm trying to take advantage of any opportunity that I get, and basically just be the best teammate that I can be. Try to make connections and build relationships with people, whether it's teammates, coaches, fans. And use the platform for positive things. And none of that changes when you're up and down from the big leagues to AAA. I just think it requires almost like a surrendering of that situation. And once you're kind of accepting of that and you surrender the consequences, I think it just frees you up to be your best self, on the field and in the clubhouse. Because I've played with guys who are totally different people when they're in the big leagues as compared to when they're in AAA. I'm talking like in the clubhouse, like just interacting with them, having conversations, like they're just angry and depressed and stressed out when they're in AAA, and then when they're in the big leagues, they'll act like they're on top of the world. And I just don't think that's good for anyone's mental health, and it certainly doesn't build relationships in a positive way.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think I've learned. I did not know very much about professional baseball till we got to know you and kind of follow you over the past several years, but it's like everyone wants to be a pro baseball player, but like sometimes when you actually talk to pro baseball players about what it's like don't get me wrong, it's awesome to play baseball as your job, but it's not all what you just see on TV and sunshines and rainbows. There's really challenges, and it's a tough life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, the fans see the games on TV and that's what they think of for pro baseball, but it consumes, for the players, it consumes our entire life, in the off season and during the season. And, there's a lot of challenges. There are sacrifices that you have to make in order to live that lifestyle. But, it's also the reward and the payout and the benefits are, that's kind of what makes it worth it. And just to be able to say that you made it to the highest level of competition in the world. When you're in the big leagues, you're one of the top 1,000 baseball players in the world, and that's pretty special to say.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool when you have that perspective. Okay, so that's enough reminiscing on the good. I really want to dive into and share some insights into what went into you making it back. Kind of share the whole story, but it wasn't that easy. I distinctly remember after the stress fracture in your elbow, kind of having a conversation when you came back and as you were healing, and just saying because you and I even talked about this during your Tommy John rehab, and it's something we think about with every pro baseball pitcher. Is it's very easy for people to sit and pick apart pitchers' mechanics and say, oh, he should do that better, that's inefficient. But when you're working with somebody that has already been one of the top 1,000 baseball players in the world, and it's I promise we could change a bunch of stuff and make him ideal, and it wouldn't go well, right? We would make you average.
Yep.
And so, but we, I distinctly remember having this conversation where it was all right, at this point it's been 2 or 3 years in a row, and those things that we talked about or that you talked about over the years that maybe you didn't want to fiddle with is no, you need to go find a coach, and you've been working with Tread online, but it's no, you need to go and do this, because this isn't working anymore. So people may not realize that you made it back to the big leagues, not only with, I don't want to say totally different mechanics, but relatively reworking your mechanics and an entirely different pitch arsenal than what you went through, or what you made it to the big leagues previously, which again, I don't know if people understand how hard that is.
Yeah.
So I guess outside of just the injuries, what led you to make the mechanical changes, and what did you kind of work on, or what did you want to tweak mechanically?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to your point, yeah, I think when you're talking about high level pitchers, it's easy to say, fix X, Y, or Z, but the thing you have to remember is those unique flaws, so to speak, are exactly what makes that pitcher effective. That's, those nuances and kind of different things are exactly what makes that pitcher who he is. And so I don't think it should be taken lightly to try and make big overhauls to mechanics. But yeah, when it came to my rehab situation, I just couldn't seem to get healthy, and it was pretty obvious that I needed to make some sort of change if I ever wanted to pitch competitively again. So I would say, after a certain amount of injuries, it was just pretty clear that I needed to rework some things. And so yeah, I ended up going down to Tread Athletics, which most pitchers have probably heard of them now, and I just kind of committed to going there until I got healthy, make whatever changes we kind of decided on. And I don't know how specific you want to get about it, but for me it was basically my arm action, my arm path. I was, before the changes, I was just getting in some positions that were really putting both my shoulder and elbow in bad positions. I wasn't using my body well. I wasn't sequencing through the kinetic chain of transferring energy through my body. I was basically just all arm, and it worked while I was younger, but as I got more miles on my arm, my body stopped tolerating it. So we made a pretty major change to my arm action. To me it's obvious. Maybe to like a layman watching it, you wouldn't be able to exactly tell. Yeah. But with that though came some all the challenges of learning how to command the ball again, learning how to make the ball move the way I needed it to again. And it really did feel like I was kind of going back in time like 10 years to to just being a complete novice and not having a good feel for a lot of the stuff. And I think that's a big reason why I struggled with the Twins, because that delivery was brand new to me, and I just did not have a feel for where the ball was going and how much it was going to move and all that sort of stuff. And the only way to work through that is just getting more reps, and that's, I think that's a good takeaway too for high school kids, or college, high school, and especially younger kids. Like if any parents have young kids who they're trying to get them to learn how to throw more strikes or teach them a certain pitch or whatever, and I think the tendency is to want to just overcoach and give them all these mechanical cues, or tell them really focus on throwing strikes. I firmly believe the only way to develop those sort of things is through reps, thousands and thousands and thousands of reps. Your body just has to get a feel for those fine motor skills. And a lot of the time, I think we'd all be better off with getting out of our own way in terms of like the mechanical cues. And don't get me wrong, like in my situation, I had a very specific feel that I wanted to feel with my arm action. I wanted to feel the flip up to getting back behind my head before foot strike, and that was kind of my one cue. But within that, I just needed to get reps and let my body kind of figure it out. But yeah, it took time, and it was not an easy process, but yeah, it ended up being worth it, obviously. And I did, I guess, to address the pitch repertoire, I did end up adding in a cutter, which was a brand new pitch, and my breaking ball kind of turned into more of a big sweeper rather than kind of like a smaller curveball. So it was a couple new pitches and new delivery, and I still feel like I'm developing with that delivery. I think it's going to continue to be a process over the next several years if I continue to play that long. But yeah, it's been a process.
I want to dive into that just a shade more, because this is a conversation, and I'm not going to call out specific high school kids, but if you're listening to this, you might know who you are, that will be in the office and they'll be talking about like on both fronts, like, oh, I took working with my pitching coach yesterday, and I'm working on this change, and then like I've got a game on Friday, or every week it's like, oh, I've got this new change that I'm working on, or one of my favorites is like, I was messing around in practice yesterday with this new way to grip a specific ball to throw a new pitch, and I think it's going to be really good this weekend. And I know it's not that simple, and every time I hear this, I kind of cringe a little bit, but maybe like give a little insight. So you decide to essentially retool your mechanics, make a pretty major change, but like, yeah, it's thousands of balls, but like, what did that, it's not like you just jumped on a mound and started like, oh, let me think about this new cue. Like, what did it actually look like to try to make it stick, like through some of those repetitions?
Yeah, it was, the process was, similar to, I guess, building a house, or, if you were to build a house, you got to lay the foundation first. So for me, the foundation was taking out every part of the delivery except the arm action. So there's a specific drill called the 10 toes drill. I've shared it on my social media before, so you can go watch that. But basically, it just locks your lower half in place. So the lower half isn't even a factor at all. The only thing that's working is the upper half. And for probably 2 months when I was down at Tread, that was the only throws that I made were out of that drill, because I just needed to groove that pattern of the arm swing, the arm path, and that specific drill allowed me to do it. And I started at very low intensities, very deliberate and focused reps each throw of like feeling what I would want to feel. And then as I got more comfortable with it, then I increased the intensity. Over time, eventually I felt good throwing max intensity out of that drill, and that was when I added in the lower half. And even when I added in the lower half, I had a couple drills that I went through with that, kind of I'm drawing a blank on what you call it. Anyways, like drills where you're kind of restricting yourself. You're putting yourself in a position where you're forcing the lower half to move a certain way. So you just kind of keep adding on layers to what you've already built, and the final piece is doing it at max effort off the mound from a full delivery. So I didn't just say, okay, I'm going to start doing my arm action like this now and just continue throwing bullpens, pitching off the mound. Like you may feel, and I've played with lots of guys who are in that same situation as you were describing, and I've been there myself. In pro ball, we call it the Superdome.
Yes.
when you're just reaching for straws, you're trying to make these mechanical changes every single week. You've always got something new that you think is going to be the answer. But the reality is you're never actually going to be making any changes. All you're going to be doing is, focusing on trying to do something, but your body, your muscle memory is already programmed to do it a certain way. So I think you almost have to retrain your muscle memory, and in order to do that, you just really have to regress back to kind of square one.
Yeah. So it was kind of two months with just that one singular drill basically, and then was it like maybe another couple months before you stepped back? Are we talking 4 or 5 months before you stepped on a mound again and tried to incorporate it?
Yeah, I think after that 2 month period when I felt like I really had the arm action down, the process seemed to go a little bit quicker for me. I was able to get a really good feel for adding in the lower half while still keeping that good arm action that I had worked on. So I don't think there's any sort of standard timeline for everybody. Everyone's going to be different. It just depends on how you're able to adjust, and if you're able to maintain the right mechanics and delivery as you increase the intensity, then by all means keep going with it. But it really does take a lot of reps to drill it down, and kind of scaling down the effort level, especially at first, just being very deliberate with what you're actually trying to feel.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, giving people a little bit of science and context behind what Ben's describing is I mean, what we're really talking about when we're making a mechanical change is motor learning. And you have to teach your body a new motor pattern. And the way the human body moves is essentially, all we're doing in sports is solving movement problems. And on the baseball field, there's no reward for doing it the right way. Like, it's just balls and strikes and velocity and performance, right? So your brain, if you don't give any constraints to your body and just focus on solely how hard am I throwing and am I getting balls and strikes, whatever way you accomplish that is how your body is going to move into that. And so if you want to really change something, you have to set up the environment where the only way to do it is the way that you want it to happen. And that's by what we call constraining the system. So putting 10 toes in one direction, not letting it all happen. Like, that's a constraint. Doing these drill works and setting it up where we lock out certain positions, where we essentially leave there's only one way for you to do it correctly, where you immediately know that was good or that was bad. And that's how your brain starts zeroing in on this is like that most efficient way to move and gets that motor program down.
Yeah. Totally.
And it takes time. And so within the context of baseball season, this is where when we have college pitchers come back and ask us, should I play summer ball? Or, even high school pitchers talking about, should I play fall ball? Something like that. And I'd be curious your take on this, like reflecting back on your career, but a lot of times our question to you is like, are you performing at the level that you want to perform at? Or do we want to, are you not performing where you are and you might want to make some of these changes because you might need time out of competition, I think is what I'm trying to get home to people, where like you might need some time that you have like a safe to fail area that you can, like, you could not have made that change if you were still trying to pitch competitively. Like, you would have been a mess.
Yeah.
And so like it takes time, it takes a commitment, and if you actually want to like truly make changes and like really improve, like you might need to look for a time in your baseball schedule that allows you to step out of like competing and actually just develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one piece of advice that I would give to any young players out there, is to not only fall in love with the process, but commit a lot of time to, the training and the development side of baseball. So you have the competition arena, and then you have the development arena. And I think baseball culture in general is geared more towards competition. You have, from a young age, you have travel ball clubs who are playing year round. You have coaches who are, teaching kids that the only thing that matters is throwing strikes or putting the ball in play. And those completely fail to address, actually developing and building the foundation to have the skill set that's going to be required to play at a really high level. And I coached a travel ball team several years ago when I lived in Phoenix, and it was 7th and 8th graders, and all the parents and all the coaches that I worked with, all they cared about was winning games and how, like, throwing strikes, kids putting the ball in play. And I was basically preaching the exact opposite of that. I was saying, I could care less about winning games. I could care less about pitchers throwing strikes. I want these kids to learn how to throw the ball hard. I want these kids to find their ideal natural deliveries in order to allow them to be athletic and dynamic. I don't want them looking like a bunch of robots out there trying to throw darts into the strike zone, because you don't see major league pitchers like that. And from the hitting perspective, I would say try and swing for the fences every time. I don't care if you strike out, because you need to learn how to swing hard. And it's kind of going against the grain of baseball culture in general. But I think from like a year-round scheduling perspective, I think you need to have at least half the year, and that's if you're in the college or pro level, at least half the year committed to purely developing. Find the weaknesses or find the areas that you need to improve in and get to work, go into the gym, doing all the things you need to do. If you're younger than that, if you're a high school kid, I would say 3/4 of the year should be spent just developing, getting stronger, learning how to move right, and playing other sports even can go into that because that is developing you as a general athlete. But I think, baseball culture as a whole should really back off the focus on competition.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a huge rule, and I think in high school and kind of what you said, there's nothing wrong with playing travel ball and playing games, and maybe just shifting your focus to like, okay, I didn't perform my best, but I'm working on this new thing right now, and like, I learned something today. Like,
yep.
I'm working on it. It's a process. Like, don't just trash this new thing that you're learning. Oh, like that doesn't work. And it's like, well, maybe it would work in 3 weeks. Like, you just stick with it. You know?
My first year, I was drafted by the Cleveland Guardians, and they had a mental skills coach who talked to all the players right away. And she said, one of the first things she said was, in this organization, we want you to have a process-oriented mindset, not a results-oriented mindset. And that's something that stuck with me my entire career. And it's, maybe a little cliche, but a player with a process-oriented mindset has such an advantage over the results-oriented mindset, because you see failures as a learning opportunity. You see, things that you're bad at as an opportunity to get better. You are constantly looking for new and better ways to improve, whereas the results-oriented mindset player only cares about, how did I perform today? You're riding the emotional roller coaster. You're in the clouds after you have a great game, and then you're in the dumps after you have a bad game, and that's just not how high-level players go about their careers and their development. High-level players are focused on the process of getting better and competing against yourself, trying to be the best version of yourself that you can be, and developing a lifestyle of habits that are going to contribute towards being a better baseball player.
Yeah, so much good stuff in that. we could go down, and I mean, I think it's just something that stands out to me, and I just would reiterate to people all the time that I think one of the unique experiences with my career, between being around people like you and other pro players that we work with now at Kinetic, but then like back to being in the Green Bay Packers organization and getting to be around that environment. It's like, don't get me wrong, there are physical differences in stars versus average pros versus guys that just don't make it. But the number one thing, in my opinion, is just, you can just tell by their mindset and their work ethic is like simplifying it too much, because like you can just work hard, but like it's not enough. Like, you have to work hard on the right things, and it's just the approach to the game and the willingness to work and wanting to learn, and never just like settling, and never like being okay to be like content. Like, I am one of the best 1,000 baseball players. Like, it's okay to step back and appreciate that, but then like wanting to continue to work on it, like that's what sets people that make it to next levels versus people that don't, in my opinion and experience.
I remember, I don't know if it was this year or last year, on the show Hard Knocks, maybe you're familiar with it, but they were deciding on cuts, every year the NFL teams bring in 80 or 100 players or whatever, and they got to cut it down to 50 some, so they have to let a lot of guys go, and it's always a big decision of who to keep. And I remember this one particular team, the coach said, he was talking to the other coaches, and he said, I want that guy on my team because he's going to get the absolute most out of himself. He's going to become the best version of himself that he can be. And that's kind of what it reminded me of. Like, not everybody's going to be a star. Even myself, for example, like chances are probably that I'm never going to win a Cy Young or go to the Hall of Fame. And I'm totally okay with that because my only goal is to be the best version of myself that I can be. And I feel like I'm doing that and consistently, setting up my training and my habits to work towards that. So I would encourage all younger players to not necessarily compare yourself to everyone else or try and be the best in the world, but rather just be the best version of yourself that you can be. Find your own ceiling.
Yeah. So good. So good. Real quick before we get out of the baseball weeds here, on the new pitches, because again, this is just something that we hear a lot, like, I practice fingering this pitch differently, and I think I'm going to throw it this weekend, right? Like, I think the rationale behind your learning new pitches is related to your mechanical changes. So like balls were moving differently, things like that. But once you decide, okay, we're going to go down this new, like I'm going to learn this new pitch. Before you throw it to a live hitter in a game, what goes into that process? Because I don't think people maybe fully appreciate it. Like it's more than just like, oh, let me try to grip the ball differently and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that technology has changed a lot over the years. When I first got into the minor league, when I first was drafted in 2013, I really did not have any sort of breaking ball. And so, Cleveland taught me the breaking ball that I was throwing at the time, but that was before TrackMan or Rapsodo, any of these things where you're kind of measuring it. So in a way, it was kind of just shooting in the dark, but the main principle was that you just need to get a lot of reps with it and, kind of get a feel for throwing it, like, throwing several bullpens. Like, I would say the minimum amount of bullpens that I would feel comfortable with before taking it in a game would probably be 10, but if not a lot more than that. But with the use of with technology now, with TrackMan specifically, when you can see exactly how your ball is moving and you can see the metrics on it, and you kind of have an idea of what you're shooting for, what you're trying to get the pitch to do. I think that can actually speed up the process quite a bit, as long as you have a feel for command of it, which so for me this year, the brand new pitch was the cutter. And for whatever reason, I just had a good feel for throwing that in the strike zone. And so I started throwing it in spring training, and TrackMan validated that the pitch was moving how we wanted it to move, and I was throwing it at the right velocity. All metrics said, this pitch is a major league pitch. So then it became just a case of, do I feel comfortable throwing it in games? And, being in a spring training setting where the consequences are not quite as extreme, you have a little bit more wiggle room for failure. I did kind of just commit to throwing it a ton, and I ended up getting an even better feel for it. So I think that goes back to just getting reps. That's a common theme that you'll pick up on with baseball, and same with golf too, or lots of other sports, right? Like when it comes to like those fine motor skills, you just need reps. And I would typically say that those reps should be done in as low of a leverage of environment as possible, practice situation, or maybe throwing to, your own teammates, like a live batting practice. But you're not just going to all of a sudden say, like, mid-season, like, I'm going to start throwing a curveball and just go start flipping it in and dicing kids up in a game. Like, there has to be a process that goes into it. And maybe some players will pick it up quicker than others, but it's definitely just a situation of getting a feel and knowing that the pitch is doing what you want it to do. Yeah,
maybe we should do a baseball sickos only podcast with you and Keller, and you guys could go into the pitch metrics, just absolute weeds.
Yeah,
but
we could nerd out.
If do you have a take on how many pitches do you think like a high school or college pitcher should be throwing or like really working on?
Like in a repertoire.
Yeah, like because I've been having this more and more again where athletes will come in and we'll be talking to them, and it's usually a question that I ask initially, like, what pitches do you throw? And it's been pretty common recently to be like, well, I have a 2-seam and a 4-seam, and I throw a slider and a curveball and a changeup, and then I'm trying to learn a cutter. Yeah. And it's like
right. Yeah.
I think back to you, and I'm like, God, Ben was a major leaguer, and essentially you threw one pitch.
Like,
yeah. Like the little known fact, like last time you made it up, you basically threw sliders.
Yep. Yeah. Well, to that point, I would say it's better to have one elite pitch rather than 4 average pitches. Yeah. But I understand where the kids are coming from, because they want to be like pitchers on MLB The Show, where you have every pitcher throws 5 pitches, and it's really fun to pitch like that in a video game, but that's just not anywhere close to reality. And I don't think people understand how rare and difficult it is for a pitcher to truly have even 4 major league average pitches. So that being said, I would say for high schoolers, get your fastball figured out, both in terms of movement and command. Like, are you going to be a 4-seam guy, or are you going to be a 2-seam guy? You probably shouldn't be both. Really, you should not be. There's not a lot of guys who throw 4 seams and 2 seams. Figure out which fastball profile plays best from your arm slot, with your deception, all these things that go into it, and learn how to get guys out with your fastball. Ideally, get it to the point where you can get a lot of swing and misses on your fastball in the strike zone. That is the ultimate sign of dominance in any pitcher, is if you can get swing and misses on your fastball that are thrown in the strike zone. If you can do that, you will continue to advance to higher and higher levels. So that's priority number 1. After that, I would say figure out one off-speed pitch, whether it's some form of a breaking ball, being slider or curveball, or something in between that, and or a changeup. I kind of go back and forth on the changeup. Like, the metrics say, like, what all the major league teams and analytics departments are finding is that changeups are actually not really that effective, like on average. Now, don't get me wrong, you have a lot of outlier guys with really good changeups, and so maybe that's going to be some kids, but I don't think a changeup is like a mandatory part of a repertoire like what we used to think it was, and kind of old school coaching will say. If you can throw a changeup that is like Devin Williams, where it's essentially a curveball from the opposite-handed pitcher, that's amazing, and throw that a lot. But I would say, find the off-speed pitch that feels the most natural to you, and then just throw that a ton, and add that to your fastball, and that's really for the most part what you need. So then as you kind of advance, once you really master 2, then you could start mixing in 3, but really under no circumstance, unless you're like a potential first-round draft pick, would I say go beyond 3 pitches. Like, there's really no reason to throw 4 or more pitches unless you are a first-round draft pick, and in that case, I tip my cap to you, because you're probably a stud. So you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you're a dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really good advice. Again, I just think that, I just bring you all these conversations that I have in my office, and in the back of my brain, talking to you guys, I'm like, that doesn't sound like the way that we should be approaching this, but I think it's always good to hear it from people that are actually doing it and have kind of been through this. And I think I remember a couple of years with the Yankees where like the analytics department was like trying to get you to throw less pitches. It was like, no, like literally just throw your slider.
Yeah. Because what the data shows is that pitchers are going to be at their best when they throw their best pitch more often. And that's pretty much always the case, especially if you have a really, really good pitch. And so for any kid who wants to play at the highest level possible, you're going to need at least one elite pitch. And so maybe I should kind of differentiate. Like, if you're a high school pitcher who's throwing 70 miles an hour and you don't really have a desire to throw or to pitch beyond high school or maybe a low level college, by all means, throw 5 pitches. Go throw knuckleballs in games. Have fun. Like, you just have to know what your goal is and, what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to play baseball at the highest level possible, you need to figure out what pitch is elite and lean into that and embrace it, and you kind of build your repertoire off that. So if you have a four-seam fastball that has a lot of like good ride, like like a Josh Hader fastball or Justin Verlander type fastball, you really your entire goal is, how do I make that pitch play up even more, which for those guys, it's like throwing a hard slider that looks exactly like it out of the hand and then just kind of breaks off it. Like, it wouldn't make sense for those guys to throw a big loopy curveball that, pops up and then goes down, never looks like the fastball. So I think a good starting point for kids is like, figure out what pitch is elite, what's your best pitch, and then when thinking about your other repertoire, what can make that pitch play up even more, make hitters be off balance on that.
That's awesome. I just briefly want to talk about your the mental approach to pitching. So I think that's something that just talking to you about during the season, I'd be just curious to get your take on, if anything. I'll give you my from 20,000 square feet or 20,000 feet talking to you throughout the season. It seemed like you were maybe more freed up in the big leagues than you've been in your entire career, because in a lot of ways you didn't really know if you were going to get back. And so it's kind of like, my perspective was, you're like, I'm here, and mission accomplished. Like, not that you didn't care about the outcomes, like you wanted to do your best, but it was like, maybe you're a little bit more free, whereas in the past, like it was always, I just like so much pressure to stay there and things like that. And then you also made mention that like the pitching coach for the Braves really encouraged you to like attack hitters and like not be afraid of making mistakes, which with some of the other organizations and pitching coaches, maybe it was a couple of guys would just yell at you to throw more strikes from the bullpen. I guess, how do you feel like there was a change in your mental approach to pitching, and how do you think it's different from each pitcher on how you need to approach like the mental side of pitching, or do you think there are some commonalities that people that are successful pitchers can really share and learn from each other on?
Yeah, for me personally, I definitely did feel a shift this year. I felt like I was kind of playing with house money, so to speak. Took a lot of the pressure off myself. I was thankful just to have a job and be able to compete, and it was kind of just like, let's go out there and see what happens, instead of going out there and feeling like I have to succeed, I have to do well, because as soon as you do that, you're tensing up, and you're not going to be free to just move. One thing that I've noticed throughout my career is a lot of the best players who I've played with are almost space cadets to a certain extent, like when it comes to caring about how, like, they come across like they don't care, and it's so counterintuitive, because obviously we care, we all care so much, but how can you just completely let go of the consequences and the results and just be okay with failure? And for some guys, I think that comes naturally, just to not put so much weight and pressure on yourself. But for other guys like myself, it kind of comes through experiences or forced into having to do that, because it's your only way to succeed. But I think there's more to the mental game than just that. You kind of have things like arousal levels. Like, are you a player who does better when you're like hyper aggressive or over caffeinated or listening to heavy metal music right before? Or are you better when you're super relaxed and kind of just very smooth and easy? You kind of have guys who, like with the mental game, how do you analyze your performances? Are you somebody who likes to really reflect on everything that went well, what didn't go well? Kind of. I've dabbled with like visualizing, like after a bad game, I'll run through the game in my mind, but imagine that everything went better, and it's kind of like a way of you know of planting those positive seeds in my head instead of just letting that bad outing fester. Or maybe some guys can just easily turn the page after a bad game, no problem. So I think there's a lot that goes into the mental game, and it is very individual based. But I would say something that is kind of a common theme with everybody is that you need to be okay with failing, because baseball is a game of extreme failures, both as a hitter and a pitcher, and you're going to fail. You're going to face a lot of adversity eventually, and the only way to make it through that is by accepting that it's going to happen, seeing failures as an opportunity to learn and grow, and just continuing to push forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. All right, so that this doesn't turn into a 3-hour podcast, we've got a whole section that we're not going to get into today on pitch routines, and maybe we could even dive into a little bit of like how to attack and take apart a pitcher or a hitter and things like that. So we'll before you go back to spring training, we'll do one more podcast for everyone. Let's wrap it up with a couple of just fun questions for people. If you were like baseball commissioner, not just MLB, because don't want you to get in trouble with Major League Baseball, but just all of baseball, for youth, little league through MLB, even the Olympics now, I guess, would be incorporated. Do you have anything that you change about the sport or the game or the how anything works that way?
I think I'd probably stop changing the game. I think I'd leave the game as is and try to figure out how to market it a little better. I guess maybe one change would be shortening the season, like especially if we're talking youth at the youth level. I would try and really encourage kids to not be playing year round, spend a lot more time developing. And even on the big league side, I think there could be some benefits to shortening the season.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, high school players are starting to ramp up throwing, kind of getting ready for spring seasons that start, shockingly soon when there's still snow on the ground here. But do you have the best high school baseball memory?
I threw a no-hitter in high school with throwing only fastballs in the game except for one pitch. I threw one curveball, but it actually hit an opposing hitter in the head. And that was the only guy who reached base. Every other pitch was a fastball, threw a no-hitter, and struck out like 18 guys. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was probably my best.
Any kind of quick little short hit advice? I know there's lots of advice for high school players in this, but just starting their off season, getting ready to ramp up. Any advice for high schoolers as they go into this season?
Listen to your body, listen to your arm. Don't try and push through discomfort, and just give yourself plenty of time to ramp up. If you're a high schooler and you're actually starting to get ready for the season right now, you have plenty of time. You're at a huge advantage. Don't go too crazy, especially if you're coming off a long extended period of not throwing. I would say that's probably the biggest mistake, is just adding way too much workload way too soon for high school kids.
For sure. Shameless little plug. Ben did write a kind of a little ebook, honestly, with a throwing program included. So if you're a high schooler and you have no structure and you're like, I don't know what to do right now, hit the link in our Instagram bio or head over to our website and or just shoot us an email or DM, and we will send you Ben's ebook that he put together with a just modified kind of mock throwing program for your average high school kid. Probably not enough for a truly elite arm to follow if we're talking kids that are throwing 90, 95, but if you're just a run-of-the-mill high school player trying to develop and you just have no structure, we'd be happy to help you out with that to try to keep you healthy.
Absolutely.
All right, and then favorite strikeout this season?
Ooh, man.
There were a lot of them.
Yeah. I would have to say, oh man. probably Nolan Arenado, just because of the name of who he is. Future Hall of Famer. Anytime you strike out a future Hall of Famer, that's pretty special. But probably my first strikeout of the first batter that I faced in my first game back, I struck him out on probably the best slider that I've ever thrown in my life. So that probably takes the cake.
Yeah, you made a couple people look a little silly this year. there were some good ones. So
yep.
Well, man, I'm super appreciative of the time. I would really encourage some high school and college pitchers that really want to develop to listen to this more than one time. And Ben is incredibly giving with his time, both on podcasts like this. He creates content on some of his social media channels, and honestly might share too much of his time with conversations and trying to help people. He truly loves the sport and the game, and has a lot of great perspective. So hopefully you guys all really appreciate this and are able to take stuff away, and thank you for the time, and see if we can track down a little bit more time to talk about kind of routines as a reliever and some of what you've learned about taking care of your body over the years, and see if we can share a little bit of that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Nice.
Awesome. Right at an hour.
Oh, perfect.
I was like,
Not too bad.
we could jump into this next part, but I'm like,